Hey, how you doing? George Cook here. Today's Daniki subject, Sinktip Secrets, working out the myths and the confusion of Sinktips, because believe me, there's lots, because there's so much of it, it's hard to get a grip on it, so let's try to do it. Sinktips today for use on single-handers and say lines like a VersiTip, or in the mirrored of spay and switch rod use with lines such as a Skagit short, lines along that genre, even the old wind cutter for those of you still trudging along with it. You need a Skagit, by God, see a dealer near you. Sinktips come in lots of forms and lots of fashion, okay? For instance, conventional 15-foot tips can be found in intermediate, type 3, type 6, type 8. And you hear these numbers and you go, type 3, type 6. Well, what's type? Well, when you hear that number, in the case of 3 or 6 or 8, think of that number as inches per second or IPS. Sink rate, inches per second. 3 is 3, 6 is a little faster, and 8 is dropping. That's the easiest way to understand it. Hear the number, think IPS, which equals inches per second. As we kind of move away from the sink rates found in the conventional sink tips, we get into what we'll call custom sink tips. In custom sink tips, Andrew, was that the 20-pound cat that just ran by? Oh, wow, we survived. You get into stuff like T14. This happens to be a bulk spool. So if you need something to do in the wintertime, get yourself one of these and get busy. T14, T11, and T17 if you dare. You'll need it for kings and some steelhead application as well. Now you hear these numbers and you think T11, T14, T17, is it sinking 17 inches a second? No, I don't think we got a rod to cast that one. These sink, what those numbers pertain to is grains per foot. So 11 is 11, 17 is 17 grains per foot. Okay, gives you a way to measure out the overall weight of the custom sink tip that you might cut up. Now the sink rates for these guys, T11 is 8 inches a second. T14, which is by far the most commonly used custom cut set of sink tips, T14 sinks at 9 inches a second. T17, 17 grains a foot, 10 IPS, remember IPS, inches per second. This baby is like a rock, okay? Now, what are you going to do with this stuff? If you get it in a 30-foot coil or you get it in bulk, what are you going to do? Well, you can cut yourself custom cut tips, and you can make yourself your own little quiver of tips. And I'd suggest in any given one of these, whether it's T11, T14, T17, that you make the following set of tips. 9-footer, 11-footer, 13-footer, 15-footer. Now somebody might, write into the blog, well, God, you could have just said make a 10-footer and run with that. Well, you can. You can do whatever you want. You're the one doing the cutting. Now, if you want to check my wallet full of these heads, you're going to find a 9-footer. You're going to find an 11. You're going to find a 13. Actually, you're going to find two 13s. Because 13 feet of T14 is where sink rate and castability meet on the curve. And you'll find some 15-footers. And these all have strategic use value. They all have their time and their place. The shorter ones can be used sometimes on various rods and various water conditions. And the bigger ones, that 13-foot section, that 15-footer, those oftentimes are going to get used for deeper holding steelhead, particularly in the winter, sometimes in the summer in the real drench channels. And for king salmon, those 13 and 15s will have their day in court come summer, particularly in places like western Alaska on the Connecticut. Okay? But you're going to cut these guys, you're going to use these loops that come with them. And my favorite way to set up these loops is you simply slip them over the material. In this case, this one happens to be T11. And I'll run 3 nail knots. I'll run a nail knot right below the loop at the top, one in the middle, one right at the bottom. You could use any sort of monofilament as long as you're dealing with at least 8-pound test. I think 10-pound is good, doesn't matter what material, just pick something and use it. And tie those nail knots and trim them tight. Yeah, you can put aqua seal on them, and you can get real busy, particularly if you want to start in January. You can build yourself all sorts of neat little tips, and you can get them all tidy and ready to go. Mine are just, I'm nail knot mine, and what they go. We're ready. Nothing more. The older I get, the more simple I get with this stuff, because it just doesn't need a bunch of complication. Rig them up, let's roll.